This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
Choice Hotels get you more of what you value. Comfort Inn, it's calling your name. Save on the stay. Oh, and free waffles are yours to claim. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
And we're live on match day as Doug reaches for a buffalo wing. He's got it! Oh, and he's gone for a can of Pepsi too! What a finish! There's no doubt about it. It just tastes better. Match days deserve Pepsi.
We are officially into barbecue circuit season in the Canadian political landscape. Hello, welcome to the Full Comment Podcast. I'm Brian Lilly, your host. We are looking at the end of the parliamentary session this week. Of course, we had competing news conferences just days ago. Prime Minister Mark Carney explaining what he felt his government had accomplished over the last year, and Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, saying what the government had done wrong. One sticking point that's kind of important to Canada is the issue of CUSMA, our trade deal with the United States and Mexico. Prime Minister Mark Carney saying that he didn't actually bring that up on a recent call with President Donald Trump.
Also, I mean, you spoke a lot about your call being about the Middle East. How much did CUSMA play a role in your call?
We didn't discuss CUSMA yesterday. Look. We also judge the possibility. I mean, we could sign a bad deal this afternoon, right? We could have signed a bad deal a year ago. We're not going to sign a bad deal. So it has to be a real deal.
And in response, Pierre Poilievre saying Canada should be using what he calls positive leverage to get a deal.
What I would do is build up our leverage, and we have a lot, by committing to build a strategic reserve of the 10 most critical minerals, according to NATO, that you need to fight a war. Put those in a reserve. Committed to increasing oil production by another 2 million barrels. And offer the Americans the prospect that those resources could be available for their purchase in a tailored way if we get tariff-free access to their markets. We need leverage. Positive leverage. That's what President Trump has said. It's what he's written in his own book. We have that leverage.
The CUSMA review is just days away, so let's start there with our panel today, the Political Hack Panel. Stuart Thompson is National Post Parliamentary Bureau Chief, and Tasha Girden is a national political columnist. They are the team behind Political Hack, Post Media's exclusive VIP community for twice weekly deep dive political newsletters. Make sure you subscribe to the newsletter. You'll also get early access to John Ivison columns, subscriber-only videos, and more. Welcome, both of you. How are you?
Relieved that the summer's here.
Time
for a nap, Brian. Time for a nap.
Well, as you guys know, my perch is down at Queen's Park, Ontario's provincial legislature, and I saw a piece by Rob Benzie in the Toronto Star the other day talking about the potential replacements for Doug Ford. And I texted Benzie and I said, "Oh, it's summer, I see." Because that's the time of year that we all do those types of stories. And Benzie had a good laugh at that. You will see lots of silly stories over the next little while. But CUSMA is still a serious story. So, Stuart, let me start with you. The fact is, we're unlikely to get the deal that we want. Canada's preferred option is the 16-year additional renewal. It's what a bizarre number of years to put into a trade deal, but there it is. Option number 2, which Donald Trump has talked about, is just withdrawing from the deal, which, if you listen to Jamieson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, is unlikely to happen. But the most likely scenario is we're heading to, okay, we'll let the deal continue on for the next 10 years of its already agreed to life, but we're going to hit annual renewals or annual reviews, which leads to uncertainty. none of this is looking good. And yet Carney didn't raise any of this with Donald Trump on the phone the other day. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it was weird because the other thing he said was this is the kind of deal that it will come at a high level, meaning Trump and Carney will figure this out themselves, which it kind of runs against everything else he's been saying about this, because when we ask him questions, he'll talk about Dominic LeBlanc and, all of our negotiators doing all this hard work. And then he says, well, actually, probably it'll be me and Trump on a phone call. And sometimes you think you're really far away from a deal with Trump, and then the next day you get a deal. But it is hard to see how that happens if they don't mention the topic that they're supposed to be making a deal on. We had one of
The
our
whole call was about defense and the war with Iran and the upcoming NATO meetings. It sounded like a long call because Carney talked about how many people came in and out of the call, and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth joined, and this person joined, and that person joined. And never did you think, hey, just before you go, Donald, can I ask you about the trade talks?
Yeah, it was ninth on my to-do list. I forgot to get to it. But the way Carney spoke about it, too, you're right. Seemed like a long call, and it seemed like one of those wild, freewheeling Donald Trump calls where you're just talking about everything. So one of our reporters asked Carney not too long ago about the prospect of the one-year reviews happening with Kuzma. The premise being that there's been a lot of uncertainty this year, and to do this every year would be horrible, I think, for Canadians and for businesses. And Carney kind of shrugged it off. He said, if we have to do that, we'll do that. So maybe that's just his negotiating tactics, not to look too stressed about these things. But I think Canadians are probably a little more worried about it than Carney is right now.
Tasha, we've been hearing so many of our colleagues in the media and the punditry world, and they go on TV and they say, oh, nothing changes on July 1st. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? And so I go and I read the deal, hey, go to source material, read what we're actually talking about, see those three options that I laid out for you. And I went, oh no, a lot can change on July 1st. This is not the U2 song, nothing changes on New Year's Day. A lot can change on July 1st. Are we concerned enough about it, or is the government, as Stuart just said, just trying to look cool as a cucumber? Shrug it off. Don't worry. I mean, there's jobs on the line, but not mine.
Yeah, I think that the government. Well, let's rewind a little bit. The government had been in a deep freeze for about 6 months with the Americans, following the famous ads by Doug Ford last year with Ronald Reagan that upset Trump. But at the same time, they also at the time had a framework agreement on aluminum and steel, but autos was the sticking point. Autos, they couldn't really find their way through. And that's where Ford then decided to blow things up. And then they didn't talk for 6 months. And it wasn't just that they didn't talk for 6 months, but Carney was seen as weak because he couldn't rein in Ford around those ads. And that was what I've heard from people in Washington. And that it set a bad tone. So Carney's now trying to look like, I'm the man. I'm in charge. It's fine. It's fine. He's trying to look. He looks statesman-like in the rest of the world, doesn't have a problem, inking deals in India and Qatar and going around. And he's done a lot of his deals, and he was talking about those at the press conference too. But with the Americans, he needs to regain face in a way. And we saw what happened just at the G7. He didn't get a one-on-one with Trump. He cornered him and was on a hot mic at one point.
Chinese EVs over his shoulder.
Yeah, he spoke to him but that's part of Kuzma. That is a piece of Kuzma because that's trade, right? The call he just had with him about NATO, and Hegseth was on that call and stuff. If Trump was rambling on about who knows what on military issues, I think it's probably wise that Carney just didn't throw in. By the way, Kuzma. Fine. But the point is that he hasn't
bomb it like we bombed Iran. Sounds great.
Yeah, no, but on the trade piece, he has to regain credibility because he's lost it. And yes, they did delegate things to the sub-level of Greer and LeBlanc. Both ambassadors also had their input. Wiseman and Huckstra have been speaking on things. And the tone has been much better lately. Quite frankly, in the last few weeks, things have calmed down, right? So I think Carney doesn't want to upset the apple cart, look stressed, whatever. He wants to look like, we'll get a deal. We get a deal and we get a deal. Because with Trump, Trump will have a deal one day and then it changes the next. And he's not wrong on that. So the problem is, though, as you point out, there are options that kick in July 1st. And if we think there won't be any tariffs, we're dreaming. The Americans are going to keep tariffs there. They have said as much. There are going to be tariffs on certain things, whether they are what they are currently or they drop, but there are going to be some tariffs because their whole goal is to erase their trade deficit. This is the overarching goal, and that explains a lot of their 19th century mercantilist or, Gilded Age vision of like tariffs are the great equalizer. If we just tariff stuff, it means we'll collect money to compensate for the fact that, we are being shortchanged by other economies that have lower labor costs or they have state subsidies. So the only way to balance the playing field is up the cost of their stuff because it's artificially low. And that will then enable our manufacturers to produce more stuff because it'll be more competitive, even if it's expensive. The other stuff's more expensive. So this is their vision. So Carney is like sort of just, he's bobbing along there. And so I'm not surprised that he didn't get into it with Trump on that call.
So I'm going to go back to what you said about the Ford ad and the EVs, because I don't doubt that the Ford ad irritated Trump. But if you remember, on the Tuesday of that week, Trump's asked about it, and he said, I saw the ad from Canada. If I was Canada, I'd do the same ad. And on Thursday, he lost his mind and called off negotiations, citing the ad. And what happened in between there? So what I reported on at the end of October last year, and what Politico recently reported on, confirming a bunch of what I had back in the fall, is that what actually set him off was related to autos. And you said autos is a sticking point, and this goes back to that, is that because GM said that they were going to stop producing the Bright Drop electric delivery vehicles that no one was buying, and even Canada Post wasn't buying. They need to renew their fleet, and this is the perfect vehicle for short driving, lots of stops, and Canada Post wouldn't buy it. So GM stops production of that at their Ingersoll, Ontario plant. Stellantis announces that they're going to produce the Jeep Compass in Indiana. And, of course, Canadians wanted it at the Brampton plant, which had never produced it, by the way. So Carney had started the talks at the White House lunch on October 7th. They're going along well. And Melanie Joly, one of the most incompetent ministers I've ever seen in my life, decides that she's going to sue both companies. And she's going to take away the remittances on tariffs that they were getting already, but not on Ford, because Ford is not changing production. And she's going to add extra tariffs to them. It's like, so they went to the White House and said, this is what Canada's doing to us. And I'm told that that is what actually set Trump off. He said, so two companies that should be our biggest advocates for getting rid of tariffs were being attacked. It's one of those things that I keep pointing out. Trump is a giant pain in our butt, and then sometimes we're just our own worst enemies. That was a dumb move. Bringing in the 49,000 Chinese EVs, Stuart, is also a dumb move. We're trying to get a deal on autos. As Tasha said, that was the sticking point, and we keep doing moves to just not just irritate, but actually anger the Americans. What are you our partners in the auto industry, or are you not? Because you seem to be our antagonists in the auto industry, is their view.
Yeah, and this is the problem with the annual reviews, is that you're going to have these little disputes that get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, I take your point, but the other argument there, which I think is also valid, is that Canada can't be running everything it does through this filter of like tiptoeing around Donald Trump and hoping he doesn't get mad. And I've also heard too from administration, people around the administration, that there is some kind of Doug Ford derangement syndrome going on there, and it's not just the ads; it's also his appearances on TV. They do hate him.
Is the last thing Ford should be doing, and he keeps his last appearance. I sat down to watch it live. His office always sends out the advisories, and I was like, "Oh, what's he going to blow up this time?" But he wasn't antagonistic. I remember talking to Republicans in Washington who said, "Oh no, Ford's good. He just criticizes the policy, not the president." And it's about a year ago he started making it personal against Trump.
Yeah.
And that's when they said they want nothing to do with Ford.
And to what gain? You could always ask about that. And, for the Chinese EV deal, I think Tash has been one of the most effective and insightful critics of that deal, like in our newsletter, whenever we talk about it. But if you're a canola farmer, you might have an entirely different view of that. And I think that is the problem right now is that every single thing we do in Canadian politics on an international level is run through this filter of don't upset Trump. Don't make a tweet happen tomorrow that then brings more tariffs or makes the deal harder. And it's just untenable.
Well, my message to canola farmers, which would include relatives of mine, is you guys should not be relying on China because every 3 years they hit us with something on canola because they know it's a big thing. It's not that they're not the biggest export market. We could replace them or not rely on them as much, but it was 2013, 14, 2017, 2021, and now last year. So,
And this is only a 1-year deal. This is a 1-year exemption, right?
well,
The
as
soybeans
Michael
and canola.
Kovrig pointed out on TV the other day, he said China gets 5 years of EV.
EVs and 1 year of canola.
And-
we
or-
get
or-
1 year of canola.
Yeah.
Well, I want to address some of the points that Stuart made because I think the Chinese piece, the only silver lining, if there is such a thing, in Donald Trump's presidency is that it is forcing our country to confront some realities it should have done way before. And one is the infiltration of China into our politics, and the EVs should be rejected on that basis alone. It's not even about, yes, it'll upset the Americans, and that's a reason not to do it. But it's also because we have allowed ourselves to be infiltrated and, have China do elite capture on so many of our institutions and individuals and business leaders. And it goes on and on and on. And so we're 20 years behind. And Washington's been complaining about that for years, by the way. This is not like just a Trump thing. Years. The Biden administration was the one who brought in the EV mandate, and we followed that. So we've got to get our act together. On the military, it's the same thing. We have been riding the Americans' coattails. Well, okay, because we could. And I guess as a country, it's like, well, why not? But the point is, the assumption was always that they would always be there. And we just assumed to our peril and did not. And we've neglected our military. We've treated them, poorly, both our veterans and both our combatants. We do not. They have to buy their own boots, our soldiers. And, we have the stories
Bring
when they're
your
in
own
Latvia.
helmet to Latvia.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's shameful. And we have not done. So we got to step up. So finally we are, because we've got to. And it's because he's, poked a stick at us. So that's the only good thing about him is he's forcing us to be the country we should be in the first place and make these decisions. But with regard to Ford, Ford, the issue is that Carney can't rein Ford in. And the way our federalist system is set up, it's also a clash of personalities, I suppose. But the point is that if Carney can't rein anyone in, right? EB, Smith, like anyone. So he's got all these free radical atoms floating around making noise at the United States. And that does not help us in negotiations. We don't look like we're a united team. We don't look like we look like a collection of special interests in different places. And that's a problem. And the Americans exploit weakness. And they look at this and they go, huh. And I think that is one of Carney's big challenges, actually, is the domestic piece. He's, like I said, great on the international stage, great with world leaders, excellent spokesperson. But at home, it's herding cats. It's what McDonald did in the Constitution, is getting, and Brian Mulroney too, is like getting people together. And like even Mulroney couldn't get, Meech Lake and Charlottetown through. Carney's challenge is national unity and keeping people singing from the same songbook vis-a-vis the U.S., and he has not done that.
Norman Spector would tell you that Brian Mulroney did a great job when it comes to herding the cats on the free trade talks with the Americans.
Yes, well, he was, and his personal relationship too. And this is where Carney's not wrong. Is that it's a high-level thing. It's like Trump does business with people he likes. That was the message that Howard Lutnick delivered last year at a conference I was at in Toronto, the Eurasia Forum. And he said, Trump does deals with people he likes. Doesn't like you, he's not going to do a deal with you. So that's where Carney's not wrong. It's like a personality thing. And, Mulroney and Reagan was the same thing.
I think Trump likes Carney. Appears to.
I hope he does, because otherwise we're not going to get a deal by
Certainly more than Trudeau.
You mentioned the military. So, yeah, he likes everyone better than Trudeau. The you mentioned the military and that we're being grown-ups on that. I did hear Avi Lewis on TV the other day, the newly minted NDP leader, talking like he was a spokesperson for Project Plowshares and calling for us to stop the militarization of Canadian society. But we'll talk about Avi mania and whether you're catching it in a minute. Let's talk about whether politicians are mean. When Justin Trudeau was still in and people were just fed up with him, voters parked their votes with Pierre Poilievre. And then Mark Carney came in, and all I kept hearing was, well, I'm going to Carney because Poilievre's mean. I don't like him. Now we're hearing stories that Mark Carney is mean. He yells at people. He doesn't listen to caucus members. He's dismissive of staff. And of course, we all know how he treats reporters, in particular, women reporters. So is Canadian politics all about mean? Is it bad to be mean in Canadian politics? Because I believe this. I think Althea Raj was the first one at the Star, was the first one to write about how mean Carney is to his caucus and his cabinet. And I thought, all right, well, his polling numbers are going to go up 5%. What's your take on being mean in politics?
This is like if you were running one of those glamorous magazines, you would do, is mean back? And or is Carney bringing mean back? I think of this a couple of ways. One, I think of this in terms of my own work life, where I've had bosses, I won't name any names, who were sometimes seen as, especially early in my career, bosses who were seen as mean or yelly or gruff. And I actually really loved them because they told me exactly what they thought and there was no BS and you just knew exactly where you stood. But there were people who, they weren't lying. They were just interpreting it differently than I did. They'd hated that and thought that it was, borderline abusive. And I think that's exactly what's going on in the Liberal caucus, because if you talk to some Liberal MPs, they'll say, this is great. In caucus meetings, you say something and Carney actually engages with what you said. And he will actually talk to you. And sometimes he will crap on your idea, but he's engaging with it. The difference between him and Trudeau is that Trudeau would sort of politely listen and just nod his head and then not say anything and move on to the next person.
Or scroll through Instagram.
Or look at the gram. I think that, and this is a similar thing with Pierre Poilievre too, where, some people see him as gruff or mean, or he doesn't, respond to their ideas. And some people have a totally different perspective. And I think in politics, where it matters is how do voters perceive you? And is that coming through? And I think for Carney, this would become a problem if I think arrogance is probably the thing that will get him down the road if something does get him, where voters start to think this guy thinks he knows everything. This is like if we want something as a populace, he's not going to listen to us. He thinks he knows best. So if Liberal MPs are an early indicator of that as a political problem, then yeah. But I think so far Canadians don't feel that way.
Mark Carney, arrogant? Liberals, arrogant? I don't know what you're talking about,
That
Stuart.
never happened.
I've never met an arrogant politician.
Never.
Tasha, to Stuart's point about different types of bosses, I've worked with bosses who can be gruff, who can yell, who can be demanding, and those are okay. That's different than abusive. I mean, I remember one guy who used to try and rally the newsroom at about 4:30 in the afternoon on a Friday by telling us all we'd be fired next week if we didn't improve, just as everyone's heading home. I mean, that's not a good way to manage people. What's your take on Carney? I sometimes bristle at these "I've got a mean boss" stories because I think, well, the person just doesn't want to perform. So I'm cutting Carney slack on this mean thing. You?
Harper yelled. He was famous. Yelled. I think once he threw a chair. Martin yelled. People yell. Chrétien tried to strangle a protester. Like there's mean in all of us, right? When you get pushed to the wall or you don't get your way,
if you
or
ever
you're
met
like,
that protester like I did,
you
would do the same thing.
Well, that's my point. All right. I think Carney's issue is you got to perform, you got to do your job, or else you're in trouble, right? Which is it's not mean. It's a performance expectation that a lot of people weren't used to. Trudeau, to Stuart's point, nod and smile, nod and smile. Well, Trudeau didn't have that same expectation. He just expected syncophancy, if I'm pronouncing it right. Expected a bunch of sycophants. Like, they loved him. But this is the point I actually want to get to. Carney can get away with being as mean as he wants as long as he's popular. And so did Trudeau, right? If you're popular, and so did Poilievre. When did people start griping at Poilievre? Oh, gee, when his poll numbers dropped, right? Lost the election, lost his seat. Now his numbers are in the tank. People are like, we don't like you're mean. You were mean to me last election. You were mean. And now I'm going to let you have it for that. I shut up at the time because, well, everyone, voters liked you. So what am I going to say? You get away with a lot if you're popular. So Carney's issue is if his stock drops and voters turn against him, then the meanness will matter because he doesn't have a team hanging together. Some politicians are really good at doing the hanging together. Mulroney was a master at it, right? Even when his poll numbers dropped. He was at 7%, I think, before he left. It was crazy low. But his team loved him, and people speak of those days. He's no longer with us, but people remember, and they were loyal. There was a loyalty factor. You dance with the woman, with the lady that brung ya or something. I think it was another term. Yeah, right. But that's how he was, right? So he was that kind of politician. But since then, we've had a lot of angry, mean, yelly people, and it works as long as you're winning. And then people just go along because they're like, okay, what am I going to do?
What surprises me about this, and I'd like a quick comment from both of you on this. Carney is still popular. His polling numbers are high, and that's why it surprised me that this leaks out to the Star, and then other media outlets follow up on it, and they're getting Liberal MPs talking and going, oh, yeah, he's really mean. On camera, they're all, oh, no, he's wonderful. When the TV guys get you, he's wonderful. When you're talking to a ink-stained wretch like the three of us, it's, whoa, man, he can be tough. He can be bitter. Is that surprising, given that he's so popular?
I don't know. Maybe that it is a bit bizarre. I agree. But maybe they're trying to affect change. I don't know. I mean, I think they're still unhappy. Even when they're smiling at you, they're just yeah, to your point, they didn't say anything. But now, yeah, I don't know. Maybe Althea gave them a cookie or something. Talk to me. I don't know.
There is a small core, and I don't think I know how big it is or how small it is, but there is a group of Liberals who are freaked out by the direction of the government.
True.
And these were Trudeau people, and I don't think it's hard to imagine it turning into some kind of internal problem for Mark Carney anytime in the near future anyways, but it's just people who are like Stephen Guilbeault, but don't have the pension, in the bag to quit, and they're just a little bit disaffected.
I didn't notice that Guilbeault got his pension last October. I didn't notice that. We got to take a quick break. But before we take a quick break, we've got to talk about merch. Stuart, Tasha, I hope you both have your National Post merch, like a nice tote bag or a hat or something like that. From hoodies to hats to tote bags, mugs, and more, you can now shop for official Post media gear. You want National Post stuff? They've got that. You want the cool Toronto Sun hat that I've been sporting lately? It's a stylish way to show your connection to trusted journalism, and it looks good too. Visit postmedia.store. That's postmedia.store to shop the collection today. Back in moments.
This episode is brought to you by Google Health. Stop chasing someone else's definition of health. What matters is what's healthy for you. Google Health offers a new kind of coach built with Gemini for effortless tracking, sleep insights, and holistic coaching tailored to you. Visit googlestore.com to learn more and start a new relationship with your health. Requires Google account, Google Health app, internet, and Google Health Premium subscription. Features subject to change. Availability and results vary. Not intended for medical purposes. Works independently of Gemini apps. Check responses for accuracy.
You're a political junkie, right? I mean, that's why you're listening to this podcast.
But if you're not in the loop with Post Media's VIP political hack, then you're not getting even close to the whole politics story.
I'm Stuart Thompson, Parliamentary Bureau Chief.
And I'm political analyst Tasha Carradine.
We head up the team that brings Political Hack members the exclusive political intel that goes so much deeper than the news. With inside stories, sharp analysis, and behind-the-scenes scoops from Parliament Hill and beyond.
With our twice-weekly newsletters, exclusive reports from Washington, D.C., early access to John Ivison columns, and subscriber-only videos and events, Hack members get insider insight into the minds of the strategists, policy gurus, and power brokers shaping Canada's political future.
You don't want to miss all that, do you?
I sure don't. And you can get all now for less than $1 a week. Just go to nationalpost.com/newsletters to sign up.
That's nationalpost.com/newsletters.
So much is happening in politics right now. Rising tensions with the U.S. on trade and defense.
Not one, but two provincial separatist movements gaining real ground.
The Liberals trying to hang on to a razor-thin majority as the economy stumbles and with the cost of living still rising.
It's exciting.
Extremely exciting.
But the only way to get behind the scenes and right into the source code of what politicians and the people around them are really thinking is to get political hack.
Go to nationalpost.com/newsletters.
And join us.
Mark Carney is going to ask you for donations to rebuild 24 Sussex Drive, the Prime Minister's residence. No, you did not hear that incorrectly. In fact, he made the announcement on Friday.
Today, we're launching a national design and build competition to restore 24 Sussex Drive, to become, once again, a secure, accessible, and sustainable official residence and a working venue for Canada's future Prime Ministers.
When I first heard about this, guys, I thought that has to be a joke. And, the person that told me was looking at X, and I said, that's not true. And then I go online and I look, and it's an official leak to Ashley Burke at CBC. Not a knock against her. We all get official leaks from time to time. But it's like, wow, that's detailed. This is crazy. But then again, Pierre Trudeau did put in the pool using Liberal donor money at 24 Sussex Drive back in the 70s. What do you make of this idea? I am all in favor. We should have an absolutely beautiful official residence for the PM. I have no problem with taxpayer money paying for it. But I'm wondering how many people in this country that will defend Carney saying, let's do this via fundraising, have been critical of Donald Trump building the ballroom on the east wing of the White House using donor money. Is there a problem here, Tasha?
I don't think that's the same thing at all. I think
How
24
is it
Sussex.
not the same thing?
It's not the same. He's not building a monument to himself, because that's what the ballroom is, quite frankly. It's like the arch. It's like it's not the same. This is 24 Sussex is a historic residence. It was not always the residence of prime ministers. We know that, but in our lifetimes, it's been the residence of prime ministers, and I think it is. But it fell into decay. And it was embarrassing. And the reason it did is nobody wanted to spend money on it because of the public outcry every time you did. I mean, Neil Mulroney got outcry for like changing the drapes. So it crumbled away. And it's a sort of sad statement. And I think symbolism, it's funny because we are in an age of symbolism. And, Trump wants to build new stuff as symbols of himself to remember him by, whereas Carney wants to restore something previous. But both are symbolic. And I think, look, let's have a giant candidate concert with a fundraising concert with all our greatest artists and raise money. Like, why not? I think that as long as the public doesn't feel it's being soaked for this thing, or if they're voluntarily giving money to it, or if you can get big philanthropists to pony up and save it as, an architectural and a symbolic place where Canadian prime ministers can actually host events and host world leaders in style, nothing wrong with that. We should have a place. We don't need a ballroom, but we do need a house.
I'm just not sure about the whole idea of donor money stored. Taxpayer money, I'm 100% against rebuilding this. We should have a place. The idea of donors, you could get into sticky situations there.
I like Tasha's idea of like Live Aid for 24 Sussex with Bob Geldof. I could get behind that. But I agree. Like, what is more embarrassing, a rundown, rat-infested prime minister's residence or a GoFundMe to restore it? Like, it's both of those things are a little disappointing if you're a Canadian, I think. But it is reminiscent of, I was reading a Pierre Trudeau biography, and I was surprised to learn that he put a pool into 24 Sussex, and that was funded by sort of a shady donor scheme too.
He called Keith Davies, his bagman in the Senate, the guy that was the rainmaker for the Liberals in those days. And the reason he wanted the pool at 24 Sussex is he liked swimming. That was his exercise. Mm-hmm. He liked swimming, and he would go to different pools, quite often the pool at the Chateau Laurier And the RCMP would have to clear everyone out so the prime minister could swim. And he didn't like that. It annoyed him. And so he called up Davey, said, I want a pool. Get me money for a pool. Nobody knows who paid for it. You can guess some of them, but nobody knows. And just suddenly, I believe the figure back in mid-'70s was $200,000, which would be about $850,000 now. And the pool went in with liberal donor money. This isn't the same. And by the time this is done, Mark Carney's likely not going to be prime minister.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying he's enriching himself, but this just seems odd.
I'm not totally. We will have to get more details on this, of course, but we'll have to see how this is designed, because if it's Canadians putting in $10 a pop, people who really care about this doing it and building up that fund, great. But if this is like liberal-friendly foundations or rich people doing it, and you can imagine that if you are some rich developer, somebody who has an interest, and you are ponying up money for the prime minister's pet project, whether he lives in it or not, it's still a legacy project for Carney. That could be seen as a conflict. You're looking to do something nice for the prime minister, and maybe you're hoping to get something in return. So I will wait to see the details of how this fund works, but I would definitely keep your radar up for something like that, where things can get sketchy.
They could have a Bombardier wing, that sort of thing. Everyone can claim a piece of it. There'd be plaques all over the house. I take Stuart's point. I think it's true. But I do think that engaging the public in supporting this project is key to actually doing it. And involuntary contributions through tax dollars will be slammed immediately. Asking for voluntary contributions, I think people will get on board. Maybe kids will bring their penny jars to school and say, look, I'm going to give this. Do we still have pennies? I don't even know. But to donations or whatnot. I think I think that's actually creative. I think that's a good idea.
We'll have the Atkins Realis wing, because that's what SNC Lavalin is called now. And of course, they'll get the contract to build it. It's like, it is sad that we don't have an official residence. So, I don't know if you guys have been there. I've been there several times. It was built in the 1860s. And before Louis Saint Laurent, who was the first prime minister that moved in, got there, the federal government expropriated the building from the family that owned it and said, we're going to take this. And the historic part, the reason that, we should just gut it on the inside, I hope they keep the exterior, is that in the early 50s, they took out everything. They took it down to stud. So all the Victorian accoutrements that were in there were just ripped out because who needs this old stuff? And then they made it very 1950s. And then it stayed that way because, as you said, Mila Mulrooney got harangued for changing the drapes. We are too cheap in this country in terms of how we treat politicians. We believe there should be none of them, but they should do everything. They should get paid nothing. And like Doug Ford, you should sit and coach and wait for 2 hours for your flight at the airport instead of being efficient.
You couldn't even land those planes at 90% of the airports in Ontario.
It's just nuts how we are. So let's talk about Pierre Poilievre. He's headed off to the barbecue circuit. My advice to him would be that he should stop doing press conferences all the time. He should stop doing videos with kettlebells. He should just be quiet and go on a listening tour. Look, I get it. He's got to go to Stampede next week. He'll probably ride his horse in the parade like he did last year, like he has done often. But after Stampede, just go to ground. Go on a listening tour. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should, listen twice as much as you speak. Talk to the EDA presidents, talk to big donors, talk to people who used to support you but then voted for Carney, and find out what to do, and then come back in the fall. But make people miss you is kind of what I'm saying. Because unless he does something like that, I'm not sure how continuing to do what he is doing is going to turn things around. What are your thoughts on what Poilievre should do to try and turn things around, or if he even can?
Yeah, I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, and I spoke to a couple of strategists who said exactly what you said, Brian, which is that there's really nothing for Polyev in this environment. Mark Carney is in a world where he's kind of defying the laws of political gravity. His approval numbers are sky high. The Liberals are at 50% in the polls, according to the Post Media Leger polls we've been doing, and everybody else has them around that area, at least 10 points ahead of the Conservatives. And as long as Mark Carney is dealing with Donald Trump, there's very little avenue for Polyev to get back on that. So the trouble for Polyev is that his key issue, which has always been affordability, is actually owned by the Liberals right now. Carney's actually polling better on that issue than a Conservative Party. And if you talk to any conservative strategist in the world, they'll tell you that is a recipe for an election loss for them. If they're not winning on that issue, they're basically doomed. I think for Polyev, the only danger is that if the numbers slip too low, then he has MPs that are going to start to worry about their seats. And that is the real way that you encourage a revolt against your leadership, is you start to put people's careers under threat.
Tasha?
Yeah, I think Polyev's problem is that Carney has stolen all the oxygen in the room, and Polyev is reduced to saying kind of the same things over and over again. He's tried to go off on different tangents. He went on his woke tangent this week as well, going on about the sort of the wokeism and woke decisions and this kind of thing. And I think he's looking to shore up that base that responds to that sort of language. But I think that it's not going to win him new friends. And I think the problem is he has to win new friends. But can he, in this environment, get the people back who've left the Conservatives for Carney because they think, like the Boomers voters in particular, who think, oh, he's the guy to handle this. Look at him. There he's trotting around in G7 and he looks good. And, no one can, Trump whisper, he's doing the best anyone could. Would Polyev do a better job? I think that's the question Polyev can't answer. Would Polyev do a better job with all this stuff? It's hard to see how. Like for Trump, I don't see how he would do a better job with Trump. I don't know if anyone can really do a good job with Trump, but I think the going to ground and being humble about it, because I think that we were talking about the arrogance Carney has, and Polyev has arrogance too, and it comes out is that his hectoring, lecturing kind of thing. Yeah,
No.
and so I think
people that stand up and say you should vote for me and let me lead the country are. No, they're never.
It's the way
arrogant.
he says it. It's the way he says it, and I think that it's kind of like I said, it's like a broken record. And I think Polyev's great hope, and we're going to get to him. The great savior for Polyev could be Avi Lewis. Polyev has to let Avi Lewis rise like a floating balloon, right? And that will depress Liberal numbers. And then Polyev can maybe find a way in. But I agree with you. Being quiet until that happens, taking a time to meet people one-on-one, reassure them that he is not a jerk who's going to yell at them like, oh, Carney, he's going to be the listening leader, the unifier of the party, blah, blah, that sort of stuff. He should do that. I agree. But he won't get that opening, I think, until there's a game change with the NDP. And that could come. We'll see.
My discussions with caucus members, Stuart, is that, and you can see it in what they're doing, is that they're all in their own rowboat and they're all going in different directions and sometimes bumping into each other. You guys were writing on Bill C-22 about how they couldn't come up with a position because there's different factions within the party. There's the libertarian leaning folks that say, oh, no, you can't give the cops anything. And then you've got the let's back the cops faction that says give the cops everything.
Yeah. This is the trouble for them too, is there's something of a realignment happening in Canadian politics that's affecting the Conservatives. And the dynamic that Tasha laid out there is still almost completely true, which is that if the NDP does well, it's better for the Conservatives. They split the vote with the Liberals. But there is something increasingly happening, which is that the NDP is taking votes from the Conservatives and vice versa, the sort of working class vote. And I spoke to the pollster David Coletto about this, and I hadn't fully internalized how difficult this is for Polyev until Coletto laid it out for me, which is that Polyev has to take from both the Liberals and the NDP now, which is strange, or he has to generate new voters from somewhere, probably on the far right, but more likely from those two parties. But the people who are voting Liberal are generally older and they want stability and they want the status quo. And the NDP voters that the Conservatives are sharing with Avi Lewis are people who are disaffected with the whole system and they want to blow it up. And Poilievre now has to somehow appeal to both those factions of people. And I can't imagine even how you do that. You put that to a strategist, I don't think they have great ideas.
I think that, and I haven't seen that polling, and I will look at it, but the voters that the Conservatives were courting, the NDP had, were union voters, right? They were not the environmental, hard left, LEAP manifesto types that Avi Lewis appeals to, right? He wrote the LEAP manifesto. He definitely, he's like, Mr. Plowshares, leave the oil in the ground, like the whole bit, right? Union voters are not down with that. They want those jobs. Getting the oil out of the ground. He's not appealing to the union syndicaliste vote, as you would say in Quebec. Poilievre was appealing to the union vote on the basis of, good jobs, good workers, good, solid, the welder and the tradesperson, all this stuff. So I think that, to me, the NDP, that where Avi would take it is the sort of, yes, there's the bit of a socialist Mamdani, workers the world unite kind of thing, but it's more the environmental, like, where Carney is weak, because Carney's abandoned all those people. Guilbeault quit. There's people who are disgruntled in the caucus. They signed that letter, it's like they wouldn't say who they were, that they were unhappy with the environmental direction with Alberta and the MOU. So there's definitely an opening for that. And in Quebec, too, interestingly enough, Quebec and BC are both very environmentally conscious provinces. So the NDP, look, they have the by-election that's coming up where Boul Reese's seat is up for grabs, right? I don't think the NDP is going to hold it, but I'm curious to see how much they'll get in that race, right? Or is the Bloc Québécois going to win that by-election? Do the Liberals have a chance there? It's like, it's anyone's game, because there are people who are now unhappy with this government in a very specific space. If the NDP can capture that space, then their numbers go up, but that won't hurt the Conservatives. If they still fight over the union voters, if the NDP steal them back, yeah. But I don't necessarily see that happening with Lewis. He's pretty radical, and I don't think that's his game.
I would imagine that the Conservatives would hold some of the union vote, but I can see some of it going over to Carney if he gets things done. But so
True.
far, he's still just promising and not delivering. But it's not hurting him. And we go back to the quote that he gave just after the election when, I think it was one of your reporters, Stuart, who asked him, how will voters hold you to account? And he said, you'll hold me to account by the price at the grocery stores. And Canada still has the top food inflation in the G7 month after month after month. And people are like, well, yeah, it's not his fault, it's Trump's. And so, like, he's Teflon still at the moment. So not delivering doesn't seem to be hurting him.
Yeah, it is remarkable how much benefit of the doubt voters are giving Mark Carney right now. And if you're a conservative, it's frustrating because, as we said before, there's not much you can do. It's an environment where whatever you say just goes into the wind and gets mostly ignored. But if there were anything to take as a silver lining from that, it's that it has to end. At some point, we saw just at the end of the sitting, this condo bailout policy that the Liberals rolled out, that the rollout of that and the policy of that felt like late Trudeau type policymaking, because not only was it a dumb policy, but it was rolled out really, really, really poorly. And you should check the stories from when that came out. Almost every media outlet has a correction on that story. And if one media outlet has a correction, then they screwed up. But if we all do, then the government really screwed it up because they got details wrong and they didn't tell us everything about it right away.
So you want to laugh on that point, Stuart? I wrote a column a year ago saying they should actually do what they're doing. Seriously, you can dig it out. I said, why are you building new houses when there is existing stuff that can't be sold? If you want to just stick people in spaces and give them temporary homes, that's out there. If you build more, you're just going to depress prices further. That is stupid. And no one's going to build more because there's no incentive because you can't sell anything. So existing stock, scoop it up at bargain prices and sell it to other people and make some money. Literally, you can find it online. So I was laughing really hard when I saw that announcement.
Well, never underestimate government's ability to take a good idea and screw it up royally.
Carney admitted that they rolled it out badly. So Gregor Robertson was in Toronto last week with Premier Ford announcing a different thing. They're just doing they're not doing the condo bailout in Ontario. They're just doing the development charge thing, which everyone confused with the price of the condos in BC. I think that's the correction you're talking about, the $3.2 billion. And so Gregor Robertson had to correct the record. And then a couple days later, Mark Carney has to correct the record and admit that they're not rolling it out properly. And he says, but it's going to be rent to buy. That's what we're going to do with this. And then the BC government comes out and says, no, we're just going to be landlords. So, I mean, they can't get this straight at all. I disagree with the policy. You think it's good, Tasha. We'll all agree that it's horrible rollout because no one knows what they're doing.
But the concept was, don't put more stock in the market when the market's already depressed.
Okay.
As an investor, that's stupid.
Can I quickly give you my explanation for this, Brian, which is purely based on speculation? But that night that they rolled out the policy, Carney had flown to BC for the soccer game. And I do wonder if maybe he was like, well, I'm going to BC for this soccer game, and you guys are not going to tell me no. But we may as well roll something out while we're there. And that's what happens when you do it off the side of your desk.
Let's ask about Avimania, because, Stuart, you mentioned the Leger poll that they do for Post Media. That latest poll from Leger, out just a few days ago, has the Liberals at 48 nationally, the Conservatives at 34, and the NDP at 6. Big problem for the Conservatives in the last election was that here in Ontario, sure, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives got 41% of the vote, but the NDP went to 4.9%, and the Liberals were at almost 50 and took the vast majority of seats. 6% nationally isn't exactly Avimania. Nanos has the NDP at 11, Abacus at 9, Liaison at 14, Main Street at 12. Is Avi Lewis turning things around, or is he doing what I told you guys months ago he would do, which is bring Audrey McLaughlin energy to the NDP once again?
Ooh. I don't know. I think Avi. I've known Avi a long time. Full disclosure, I produced his first show when he was at CBC, like in 1997, 98. And he is very. He hasn't changed his stripes in terms of being very, very hard left. And he comes by his family, as we all know, his father, his grandfather. So it's like dyed-in-the-wool socialism here. But he's been very heavy on the environmental piece, like I mentioned earlier, in the last decade. And that is the Achilles heel of Carney, if you will, if he wants to strip away voters because of what's happening with Alberta, with the pipeline, and with the major projects in general. I think, the approval process, let's speed it up. So I think that is the best opening. Now, is that gonna soar his popularity to like 20%, where the NDP needs to be if the Conservatives are gonna form government, right? That's ideally around that sort of late high teens. If that's happening, then it's much easier for the Conservatives to get in. I don't know. I mean, I think it depends on how things go with Carney, too, and how it goes with this. We'll see with the Alberta referendum, with the MOU, with the approval, which is slated for the same time for the pipeline in October. The Major Projects Office has to make a decision. I think all that stuff may start to come to a head. The election's 3 years away. So really, at this point, what Avi is today doesn't really matter for that. It's where he can go. So we'll see where he can go.
Stuart?
Yeah, I think Tasha's right that it's probably the environment and maybe some kind of, blow it all up, affordability so bad sentiment from young voters that Avi can focus on.
I personally can't wait for those government grocery stores.
just as a journalistic enterprise to go and see them and write a story about it, right?
Oh boy!
But I would point to recent polling on climate change, and it's a funny issue because Canadians will tell you they care a lot about climate change. They're very concerned, but then you get them to rank those issues, and it's like 13th on their priority list. And I do think that sometimes you have to look at these latent issues, the ones that are kind of under the surface and not really a part of our politics, and just imagine what it would be like if that was a big issue, because it would definitely benefit Avi Lewis. The last latent issue that we had that rose to prominence was immigration. And, for 15 years, political scientists would say people have thoughts about immigration, but they don't care that much about the issue itself. At some point, they might care about climate change in the same way. It might be a big wildfire or some natural disaster or some other event. But I think that's what Avi Lewis has to be looking at is, sure, Mark Carney is disaffecting environmental voters, but they care more about affordability and Donald Trump right now.
Daryl Bricker, the head of polling for Ipsos, told me years ago, the environment and climate change becomes the number one issue when everything else is going really well. And it falls off a cliff as soon as people are worried about their jobs, the economy, housing affordability, etc. So I'll ask you one final question. And Tasha, you said the election's 3 years away. And that's generally my thinking. But handicap this. Does Carney go early while Donald Trump is still in office to secure another majority, an electoral majority instead of a manufactured one? Does he run against Donald Trump one last time?
Good point. I think he'd be smart to. I mean, it also depends what's happened by then. Does he have a deal? Are we in this year-over-year Kuzma renegotiation situation? What else has Trump done? Is there another war somewhere that he started? Who knows? Like, it's impossible to really predict what Trump will do, obviously. And in consequence, running against Trump is fantastic right now. I agree. Who knows? It probably would be a wise thing, though, I think, to have him as the foil. Unless Trump has a heart attack, dies, and J.D. Vance is there. But I guess then it's the same length of mandate, so it wouldn't matter, right? But, people that Canadians don't like, an American leader people Canadians don't like, put that person there and run against them. I mean, Doug Ford won his election as well in Ontario, running against Trump, and ignoring his actual opponents. So I think Carney probably would be wise to follow that advice, yeah.
Ford's still doing that, and the latest Abacus poll shows he would get a majority again.
He has no one right now. There's literally no leader for the Liberals.
I mean, the official opposition does have a leader, but nobody knows who she is. And just for the record, her name is Merritt Stiles. Stuart, your thoughts? Does Carney go early to use Trump as the boogeyman?
Yeah, I think strategically it's probably smart. But I think reporters are still wrapping their heads around Mark Carney. Like, what is he as a person and what are his tendencies? The one thing I do know for sure about him, and I wrote about this during the campaign, is that he hates the campaign. And it's just not what he wants to be doing. I watched him try to use a table saw and it went very poorly. And he just can't get himself into that. And he's actually pretty good at like working a room, but it's the play acting, I think, that he doesn't like, and I think he sees it as wasted time. He could be governing.
Beneath him, Stuart, to use that table saw. Come on.
I was there with Stuart to watch that awkward table.
That's right. You were there that day.
It was very awkward.
In fairness, he did better than people expected. I thought he'd be, he did better on the campaign than he grinned and bore it better than he probably thought.
But so Trudeau loved campaigning. Poilievre loves campaigning. Carney hates it. But maybe he goes early. All right. We'll leave it there, guys. That's been a great talk. Make sure you get your merch at postmedia.store, of course. We'll talk again soon. Full Comment is a Post Media podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. This episode was produced by Andre Proulx. Theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. Make sure you hit subscribe and share this on social media. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Brian Lilly.
You're a political junkie, right? I mean, that's why you're listening to this podcast.
But if you're not in the loop with Post Media's VIP political hack, then you're not getting even close to the whole politics story.
I'm Stuart Thompson, Parliamentary Bureau Chief.
And I'm political analyst Tasha Keridan.
We head up the team that brings political hack members the exclusive political intel that goes so much deeper than the news. With inside stories, sharp analysis, and behind-the-scenes scoops from Parliament Hill and beyond.
With our twice-weekly newsletters, exclusive reports from Washington, D.C., early access to John Ivison columns, and subscriber-only videos and events, hack members get insider insight into the minds of the strategists, policy gurus, and power brokers shaping Canada's political future.
You don't want to miss all that, do you?
I sure don't. And you can get all now for less than $1 a week. Just go to nationalpost.com/newsletters to sign up.
That's nationalpost.com/newsletters.
So much is happening in politics right now. Rising tensions with the U.S. on trade and defense.
Not one, but two provincial separatist movements gaining real ground.
The Liberals trying to hang on to a razor-thin majority as the economy stumbles and with the cost of living still rising.
It's exciting.
Extremely exciting.
But the only way to get behind the scenes and right into the source code of what politicians and the people around them are really thinking is to get political hack.
Go to nationalpost.com/newsletters.
And join us.